Well, hello again, guys. This is Christian Bassar speaking to you again with finally another installment of History Vice video blog. So it's been about a month since I did one of these. So I think I did a This Week in History for like December, I think Christmas week. I think was the last one I did. So it's been a long time. Well, I've moved since then, and I'm also attending classes at college. So plus working part time. So time is running short basically. So it's a little interesting there. So sorry for the delay in all these videos, but I won't commit to any number of videos at a certain time right now because I don't know what my schedule is going to be like and everything like that at a certain time. So but I'll just do what I can and put out my thoughts. So anyway, my thoughts for today are on the Aleutian Islands campaign during World War II, and a specific aspect of it. But just to give a little background, during the Battle of Midway in June 1942, which was of course the battle where the Japanese fleet tried to go down to the Midway Islands. It's actually pretty close to Hawaii actually, and the Japanese wanted to destroy the American fleet. And big decisive battle, and unfortunately for the Japanese, this gambit failed miserably. So they lost a bunch of aircraft carriers, and basically the rest of the Pacific War was, as they say, history. So that went pretty badly for them. But interestingly, the Japanese attacked the Aleutian Islands as well at that same time. And the Aleutian Islands are islands in Alaska. They're part of Alaska, and they're part of the Aleutian Islands chain. And they attacked three places. They attacked Dutch Harbor, where on June 3rd and 4th, 1942, where some Americans were. And they killed 75 or 78 American soldiers, I believe. And over those attacks, I believe some Japanese aircraft were shot down. And so it was kind of a Pearl Harbor style attack, but of course, much lesser scale, right? And it's obviously not well known, or as well known as Pearl Harbor anyway. And at the same time, on June 7th, the Japanese landed on the islands of Kiska and Attu. And it was on one of those islands. I'm not exactly sure which one, but there were some Americans on one of these islands, and one of them actually got killed. He was trying to run away from the Japanese troops, and I believe the rest of the people were taken back to Japan. But in any case, there's a lot of discussion about whether this was a diversionary attack or it was not, or if it was something different. So a lot of people do say it was because, obviously if you attack one area, the Aleutians there, it will distract the Americans from your attack over here. Man, this is hard to do in a mirror. But so it's like that, right? It's obviously spreading out enemy forces, diverting them from what's most important. And obviously Midway was the most important thing. And it was about a year later, there were about 2,500 troops on Attu, on the island of Attu, and a few on Kiska as well. So it wasn't a huge force. I mean, it was sizable, but it wasn't huge. It was certainly not as big as any large-scale invasion, say, such as the Normandy invasions, which was the biggest amphibious invasion in history. And certainly wasn't the large scale of Midway with, lots of ships and thousands of men involved. So that's definitely there. You could definitely look at that as a diversionary tactic, and also the Aleutians were American territory. So you could definitely say it's like the Americans might say, oh no, they're attacking our territory, we got to go take that out, right? But there are some of the contrary opinion, which is very interesting, and they make very good points as well, where basically, let's go to our friend Google Earth, and let's explain this with a bit of a map picture.
So here's our trusty friend Google Earth. And so you can see here are the Midway Islands. So this is where the Battle of Midway was fought, around here. And as you can see, kind of close to Hawaii there. But let's zoom out further and go up to the Aleutians. So I already have Kiska, Alaska mapped out there. And here is Attu. That's Attu Island right there. That's where the only battle of World War II was fought on American soil. Aside, of course, from Pearl Harbor, but that wasn't a land battle. This was an actual land battle. It was in May 1943. So the Japanese took this island on June 7th, 1942, but then I believe it was May 13th to, I believe, the 29th. There was a battle fought there, and there were 2,500 Japanese troops on this island when the Americans came here. And then there was a pretty fierce battle and everything like that, and eventually the Japanese were taken out. They were done. So there was a battle there, and also with Kiska. There's Kiska Island right there, and this I found was really interesting. Here, there's a Japanese sub there in Kiska Harbor. So I don't know how it must have just gotten beached over time, and then tides changed or something like that, but I'm not sure. But then there's an artillery gun there, so it's quite amazing. This is on American soil, and but what the interesting thing with Kiska is that the Americans and Canadians, actually, Royal Canadian Air Force, bombed this island in preparation for an invasion after Attu was taken. But when the Japanese had actually fled, they escaped under fog. And when the Canadian and American troops landed on Kiska, there were no enemy to be found. So it was there was a lot of troops involved in that action too, but it turned out to be, there was no fighting necessary. So that was the conclusion of the Aleutian Islands campaign. These two islands right here, and so you can see there, as Walter Lord suggests, here are the Aleutians up here. Here's Midway. Here's Hawaii, which is basically where the U.S. Navy always was. That's why the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in the first place in 1941. So you can see Walter Lord makes this point. When the Japanese go here, if the Japanese meant to attack the Aleutians as a diversionary attack, the Americans would have to go up here in a straight line to Kiska. But look how close the Midway Islands are. If you go like here, and then it's pretty much right there. So the Japanese would have to be extremely lucky to slip by the American fleet going this way. The Japanese would have to get extremely lucky going by here and not being noticed. So it's, that kind of makes the diversionary tactic a little hard to swallow, or that idea. So it's so anyway, that just kind of shows that part of it, and definitely what Walter Lord suggests.
So you can see there that there's definitely good points on both sides, and also Walter Lord, who actually suggested this idea originally of the Midway being on the way to the Aleutians from Hawaii, is another point that basically the Japanese wanted a decisive battle at Midway. So, and their fleet there was extremely strong. So Lord even suggests that's well, if their fleet was so strong, why would they need a diversion? That's the other thing too. So that's also very interesting. And a lot of the fighting on the Aleutian Islands later, there was a lot of fear in western North America, like in Alaska and the western coast of British Columbia, that the Japanese were there. So obviously, and this had started beforehand, but obviously the Alaska Highway going from Dawson Creek, British Columbia, which is about an hour away from where I grew up, which is kind of cool, and that highway going all the way from there to Alaska was part of that effort, just in case there was any war effort needed in Alaska, or for the defense of North America in any case. So there was a lot of public unrest about that, a lot of public fear, and unfortunately that caused a lot of prejudice against Japanese Canadians, which is a kind of a dark history in our World War II history. So with Japanese internment camps and also Japanese Canadian fishermen being captured off the BC coast. So it's a very interesting there. You got the diversionary theory where basically it's like, okay, well, the Japanese would want to divert the Americans away from Midway. But then there's the other side, which is basically, well, maybe the Japanese had different plans where maybe they did want to invade North America from there. It's a possible springboard. But another interesting theory about that is where there's another reason why the Japanese would want to do this. Because what happened was there was the Doolittle Raid. It was sometime in 1942. It was before Midway. I believe it was in April. I can't quite remember that now. But the Doolittle Raid was launched from an aircraft carrier, and Doolittle bombed Tokyo with some B-25 bombers. So the Japanese were freaked out by this, and it's like, whoa, boy, the Japanese or the Americans can attack us now. They can bomb our mainland. It's like, holy crap! So, but some of them feared that the Americans came from the Aleutians, which they didn't. But that's another thing too. And also, there was Walter Lord also says that the Japanese probably wanted the Aleutians to break off the supply lines between the U.S. and Russia. And of course, the Americans were ferrying aircraft and everything under Lend-Lease to Russia. And Japan and Russia weren't fighting at the time. But any kind of a trade deal between one of your enemies and a neutral power is not good because it helps your enemy, right? So, and also the Japanese had fought the Russians before, about 40 years before this, so in the Russo-Japanese War, so there probably was a bit of fear that the Russians would turn on them, which eventually they did when it was too late. And so it's very interesting. So there's definitely different perspectives on different things. So it's with good points for both. And if you want to put down your views on this, you can write them down in the comments there. And and sorry for this late video, and we'll talk to you later. And you have a good time and a great weekend.